Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines.
Furiosa is the sequel to the visually stunning epic Mad Max Fury Road, and after watching it, they could have just called it Dementus.
It's time to take what's rightfully ours.
Chris Hemsworth kind of stole the show. It's also the only place I've ever seen a carnivorous tree, and we'll get to that.
Let's do this, yeah? Yeah.
Welcome back to Poprageous, my friends. I'm Danny Alex. This is a spoiler-free review, and at the end, I'll give you my score out of 10. And let me know in the comments section how you would score this movie. I'd love to know. How would I describe Furiosa? Well, it's a pretty good movie with a kind of a stupid ending, as in carnivorous trees stupid. More on that later, you can guarantee that. The first Mad Max movie starred Mel Gibson in 1979, and I do remember I was 12 years old when it came out. It was an awesome movie for its day and was simply called Mad Max. It's the name that now headlines this nuclear apocalyptic world in Australia, where gangs of raucous testosterone-driven men scour and plunder anything and everything they can to survive the brutal wasteland. I mean, it's a very cool concept. Enter Imperator Furiosa Bassa, who was first seen in Mad Max Fury Road and was played by Charlize Theron, who actually did a fantastic job. Now, Furiosa gets her own spin-off simply called Furiosa, a Mad Max story, without the Mad Max. And once again, George Miller does an amazing job creating a believable world where brute force and highly modified gas-powered cars, trucks, and motorcycles are the things that keep you alive in this merciless world. But Furiosa survives on brains and quick thinking, which should always be a deciding factor as to whether a character lives or dies.
Who do we have here?
So my question before seeing this movie, as I'm sure you might have been asking the same one, is this going to be a 100-pound Anya Taylor-Joy beating up on 220-pound Chris Hemsworth kind of movie?
How's that even possible?
Was this just going to be an over-the-top girl boss movie? That's what I wanted to know. Well, I was happy to see that it wasn't. Furiosa actually takes a pretty good beating in this movie and never gets into a hand-to-hand fight that doesn't involve some element that can potentially give her an upper hand, like fighting in small places where her size would actually be an advantage. So like Fury Road, this movie has some fantastic visuals. The stunts are simply amazing when you think of the planning and skill needed to film them without someone getting hurt.
Go on.
It wasn't nearly as good as Fury Road, but it had its share of impressive scenes. The biggest fight scene happens in the middle of the movie, and with a 2-hour and 28-minute runtime, yes, Hollywood is loving their 2.5-hour movies, it did feel as though this movie dragged on in places before we got to some real meat and potatoes. In fact, we don't even get to see Anya Taylor-Joy until a full hour into the movie.
I'm Furiosa!
When the plot finally centers around Furiosa, Immortan Joe, and Dr. Dementus, also known as Dr. D, played by Chris Hemsworth, who basically, I'm telling you, he basically steals the show in this movie. This was his movie, and if you leave remembering anything, it'll be his character and his performance. I loved it. I thought it was one of his best performances ever.
Bashing baby!
I'm not sure why he's a doctor, though. And if anyone knows, put it into the comments, because I googled it and it didn't come up with anything. It's a full-on revenge movie and basically follows Furiosa when she's captured as a young girl and becomes fixated on nothing but revenge after the death of her mother at the hands of Dr. D. My mother was marvelous, I think was the term that she used 2 or 3 times.
My mother was magnificent.
Yeah, why not? The story and the plot are convincing, but just like Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which I just saw before this is a good movie. It's just that it's not a great one. The stunts aren't as impressive as Fury Road, and it feels as if it's missing that last 10% of gut-wrenching stakes to make the story really stand out. Furiosa is another movie that feels as though the first half drags on too long, with the second half finally giving some much needed adrenaline rushes to get the story set up and moving into some real action. I felt they didn't need to spend so much time on Furiosa's early childhood, although actress Alyla Browne did a fantastic job with the character, but it felt as though it got bogged down with the pace hitting low gear for too long.
Logical decision, logically arrived at.
It isn't until we meet Praetorian Jack that things really start to heat up in the middle of the movie. And I'll give this movie huge credit for Furiosa having to earn and learn her way into being a kick-ass fighter for the second half of this movie. All characters need their power to be believable, and it has to originate logically so we can buy into it. For a 100-pound woman, she really needed a reason why she was able to whoop some serious ass. Setting her up with Praetorian Jack as her mentor was the perfect way to give her believable skills to fight the men in this movie who all looked as though they were physically well put together.
Also logical, Captain.
After the slower paced first half, the movie did a great job increasing the tension through till the end. All of the moving parts in this movie had motivations that made sense, with each character having good reasons to do what they do. This movie, Furiosa, is actually much needed relief from the majority of movies we've been getting from Hollywood lately. It's been a long string of subpar movies that have deservedly underperformed and lost money. The 2024 box office is down almost 25% from last year, and 2023 was a terrible year as well. The one thing I really didn't like about this movie was the ending, where we basically have a carnivorous tree. Now, I don't want to give the ending away, but how the final scene is set up makes no sense whatsoever. Trees make their own food through photosynthesis, not from devouring human flesh. Then, after Furiosa waits all this time for this tree to grow, she picks one peach, the first peach, gives it to the women kept by Immortan Joe, and they head off into their big-ass tanker truck. It just didn't make much sense, but I get what they were trying to suggest and do with the ending. I get it. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm giving Furiosa a score of 7.5. Look, this is a good movie, well worth a trip to theaters, with a strong cast, good story and plot, and George Miller's style of over-the-top stunts that gives you plenty of visual candy to keep your interest. And that's all I've got on Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, and I will see you in our next video. Cheers.